first.
Taoiseach, last Saturday week on the 23rd of June, Canadian tourist Nino Dalmatian was attacked on O'Connell Street in the early hours of the morning. He was viciously beaten, sustained serious injuries and was taken to the Mater Hospital. He died there yesterday with his parents and his sister at his bedside. I want to express my deepest sympathies to Mr. Dalmatian's parents, his family and his friends. Nino came to Dublin to experience all the greatness of our capital city. That he didn't get to go home is heartbreaking. The vicious attack that led to Mr. Dalmatian's death again highlights the hard reality that our city centre is not safe. And I say this as a very proud Dubliner, as a Dubliner who believes that this is the greatest city in the world, with the best people and the best communities. But the truth is that Dublin's city centre is scourged with antisocial behaviour, open drug dealing, drug consumption and by gangs who create a daily atmosphere of fear and intimidation. And this remains the case 7 months after a complete collapse of law and order during the Dublin riots. Government sticking its head in the sand and declaring Dublin city centre safe doesn't change that reality, Taoiseach. Talk to anybody who works here, runs a business or lives in the inner city and they will tell you the truth. They don't feel safe. The communities of the inner city are sick and tired of the antisocial behaviour, the sense of threat and dread, fed up with the lack of support and services, angry that the Garda resources are stretched beyond imagination. In the aftermath of the Dublin riots, government made big promises, but the truth is that you continue to fail the people of this city. All of us who live and work here, who walk these streets, who grow up in Dublin, who come to visit and who love this city deserve better. Lerian an tunsi tragodach Nino Dalmatian nachhfuil lor chathair bailíocha clia sábháilte. Ní mór ag an rialtas dúiseacht agus fíorréití a chuirt chun cinn chun fíor athrú a chur I bhfeidhm. Taoiseach, people need to know that they are safe in the city of Dublin at any time. That's the bare minimum that people are entitled to. So we need now real action from government. We need proper investment of resources. And the first step is that government must acknowledge the true extent of the challenge. Pretending that everything is rosy in the garden simply won't get the job done. Dublin city centre needs proper, ongoing Garda presence of a scale necessary to meet this challenge. That means a strong, visible daily operation to ensure that people are safe and that the centre of our city is returned to the people, to those who live here, who work here, who operate businesses in Dublin and those who visit our great city. And Taoiseach, the inner city must also be invested in. Communities have really felt the lack of proper investment in youth work, in community development and local services. Safe communities, strong communities are built from the grassroots up. So Taoiseach, can I ask you, what is government's response to this latest brutality and loss of life on the main street of our capital city?
Deputy McDonald, Taoiseach, please.
Thanks very much, Ceann Comhairle. As I rise today in the Dáil, I just have to begin by acknowledging that since we last met as a Dáil, only yesterday, 4 lives have been lost on our roads. 4 lives in the last 24 hours. And I know that communities in Mayo and in Westmeath have been devastated by the news of this loss of life. And I know I join with everybody in this House in sending our deepest sympathies to the families of those who have died. This tragically brings the number of lives lost on Irish roads already this year to 97. But of course, no number can hide the reality in terms of the personal tragedy and upset and the loss their families and friends behind each of those numbers feel. So I just wanted to really acknowledge that as a stark reminder of the importance of road safety and the dangers on our roads. I want to thank Deputy McDonald for raising this very important issue this afternoon. I'm absolutely appalled at the recent vicious attack in Dublin city centre, which resulted in the death of a young man, Nino Dalmatian. My thoughts are with his loved ones, a man who came from Montreal to, as you say, enjoy the best of our city, the best of our country, came here on his holidays. The attack was absolutely reprehensible, and the Gardaí have already made arrests and indeed charges in relation to this attack, and therefore it limits me somewhat in what I can say on the specific horrific tragedy. But I do know that there will now be a full murder inquiry because of the loss of Nino's life yesterday, and everybody in this House thinks of his family at this very difficult time. I want the Deputy to know, I want the people of Dublin to know, and indeed I want the people of Ireland and anyone visiting this country to know that we take extraordinarily seriously the safety of people in our city. And in many ways, I think that was so evident last weekend, where we saw so many people come to Dublin, come to Croke Park for GA matches, 2 of them, come to one of the 4 concerts that were on in different locations across the city, come to partake in Pride. We saw so many extra people, hundreds of thousands of people, come to Dublin last weekend and to enjoy our city, enjoy it safely. And that's the Dublin that I know we're all proud of, and that's the Dublin that we want to always protect. In terms of public safety, the Garda Commissioner has put significant additional resources into high visibility policing in Dublin city centre, and I want you to know, Deputy McDonald, that that will continue. And a very practical example of that is what happened as recently as last week as well, where we saw 157 new Gardaí test graduate from Templemore, from the Garda College. And of that 157, 102 of these have now been assigned to policing duties in Dublin. In addition to that, we're very much putting our money where our mouth is in terms of the priority that we attach to safety, having increased the Garda overtime budget for this year compared to last year by €28 million. Again, for people watching it at home, what that extra money is not just extra money. It's extra money that results in very, very, very many extra hours of Gardaí on the beat across our city, and indeed across towns and cities in Ireland as well. And specifically in relation to Dublin, we've now seen Operation Irene commence. This is a specific Garda operation that commences for the summer months. It runs from June to September across the Dublin metropolitan region. And it is, as the Deputy rightly implies, it is a multi-agency operation with the aim of identifying and preventing antisocial behaviour, combating alcohol consumption at an underage level, consumption of alcohol in public places, and generally putting a Garda focus for the summer months specifically on the issue of antisocial behaviour, with the overall aim of Operation Irene to enhance community safety and community confidence. So more Gardaí in Dublin, more Garda overtime for Dublin, a new Operation Irene for the summer months, and also a Dublin City Centre task force, which in fairness I know you and your colleagues welcomed, which will have an opportunity for Dublin representatives, including yourself and councillors, TDs and senators, to feed into what a vibrant, safe Dublin City Centre looks like, with a view for that task force reporting to me over the summer months.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
Thank you, Ceann Corlin, and can I also extend sympathy and solidarity to the families of those precious lives that were lost in Mayo and Westmeath. You see, Taoiseach, the fundamental problem that we have here is that you're failing to face the actual reality on the ground. And the reality on the ground is that there is not high visibility policing in Dublin's inner city. It's not there. You cite Pride, you cite occasions where there are concerts and so on. Yes, those are well organised, and I tip my hat to them for that. But I'm talking about the everyday reality of people who live in Dublin's inner city. And they will tell you to a man and to a woman that the Gardaí are not visible, they are not present, they are stretched beyond belief. They will tell you that they don't feel safe. They will tell you that when there are incidents and they make that call, that the response time is far, far too slow. That's the reality. My colleague Louise O'Reilly witnessed the aftermath of the assault on Nino. She was on site. She described it as utterly terrifying and horrific. And you see, that's not an isolated incident. This has happened before. And Taoiseach, this will happen again until there is a real step change in government. It's not enough for you to stand up and cite off statistics. You've to deal with the real lived reality that the inner city is not safe and that communities living there do not feel safe. There needs to be more Gardaí, not simply an overtime allocation,
Thank you,
an investment in communities. And I don't see a serious approach at all from you, from your government, so-called champions of law and order. You've left people really vulnerable and feeling very, very unsafe.
Taoiseach, please.
So I suppose when you're Taoiseach rather than the Leader of the Opposition, it's not good enough to just define the problem. You actually have to tell the people of Ireland the actions that you're taking. And let me absolutely agree that there's a huge body of work that we need to do in relation to Dublin City Centre. And let me tell you 8 things we're doing. We're putting body cams on our Gardaí, a key tool in terms of helping with public safety and Garda safety, and we've started that in Dublin. Secondly, we've legislated to increase the sentence for assault causing harm and to increase sentencing for anyone who attacks a member of an Garda Síochána or another emergency worker. Second measure. Third thing we're doing is this month we will bring forward more proposals from Minister Donoghue and Minister McEntee in terms of more efforts we can put in place to support the Gardaí based on what we've heard from Gardaí on the front line. Fourthly, we're legislating in relation to knife crime. That legislation was in this House, in this stall today. Fifthly, we are providing extra money for more Garda overtime. That's not a statistic, it's €28 million in order to fund more Garda hours on the streets of our capital city and across our country. We've established, the sixth thing we've done, we've established a Dublin City task force, and we're willing to work with you, work with people across the opposition, across Dublin, to see how we can pull everybody together as to what a safe, vibrant Dublin looks like. Seventh, we've put in place Operation Irene, a specific Garda multi-agency operation for the summer months to tackle antisocial behaviour. And the eighth thing we've done in a very practical sense, because we do need more Gardaí, we've seen 157 of them come out of Templemore last Friday, and we've assigned 102 of them to Dublin. They're real practical measures.
Deputy Bacik, please.
And first to express my sympathy to the family of Nino Dalmagian and indeed also to the families and communities of those who've died so tragically on our roads. Taoiseach, an appalling to hear 4 deaths in such a short space of time, bringing that total to such a horrific figure at a time when we should be seeing reductions in the numbers of road fatalities. So to join with others in that. But Taoiseach, I want to raise with you again today your government's failure on migration policy, and in particular your failure to provide adequate accommodation to those who come here seeking shelter. And the most visible evidence of this failure lies along the Grand Canal in Dublin. A beautiful landscape in normal times, normally a real place of beauty with swans nesting, very tranquil, and those of us who live locally are very lucky to do so. It's a route indeed I take every day. Just this morning I did. But in recent weeks, we've seen a changed landscape with the grim sight of large metal security barriers, which have now been in place for some weeks, which run along the canal for kilometres from Barrow Street to Portobello. Really a deliberate state vandalism of what should be a beautiful public amenity, and visual evidence of government's failure to provide sufficient accommodation for those who've come here seeking shelter from war and persecution. The barriers create an intimidating environment for anyone who's experienced it when walking along the canal. On one side the water, on the other this high fence along a narrow path with no gaps for quite long distances, and many constituents have expressed deep concern and disquiet to me about feeling trapped while walking along there. Our public spaces should be safe and accessible, and it's simply not good enough to see them being fenced off in this way because your government cannot provide enough accommodation. So what people want to know is, when will the barriers be removed, and when will the government have in place a sustainable solution to the shortage of accommodation for refugees and those seeking asylum? And I've raised this with you on countless occasions. We still have far too many people who are left with no option but to camp in tents or under tarpaulins in exposed public spaces, in street corners, public parks, but then they're being moved on, cleared out whenever the gathering becomes too obvious. And I've paid tribute to the many wonderful volunteers who are providing support, food and clothing to those who are left in such dire conditions. But this is not humane and it's not sustainable. And at the same time, we're seeing large numbers of empty buildings around the city that could be repurposed. I've raised countless times the empty Bacik Street Hospital site, just a stone's throw from the canal, which should be repurposed and yet still lies empty, like so many other state-owned buildings. We see reports today in The Independent that the building is being cleared out, but will it be repurposed as it should be for use for those who need shelter. And we've seen a lack of joined-up thinking elsewhere. My colleague Deputy Alan Kelly has raised the ridiculous situation in Borris O'Kane in Tipperary, where settled refugees who've integrated into the local community are being asked to move out to make room for others. So Taoiseach, when will we see a coordinated and sustainable approach to the accommodation of those seeking asylum? When will we see the implementation by you of your own report, the Catherine Day report, and indeed of your new comprehensive accommodation strategy for housing international protection applicants, which was announced as recently as March and which envisages the development of 14,000 state-owned beds by 2028? When will we see that begin to happen?
Well, I thank Deputy Bacik for raising this issue, and I acknowledge it's an issue that she does rightly raise on a regular basis, as you'd expect, because it is a major issue, and it's a major issue of challenge. But I do want to assure her and assure the people of her own constituency who are experiencing the barriers issue and the people more broadly across Ireland that we are endeavouring in real time to move from an emergency response to migration to a more sustainable model. And we are having to do that in real time. And I make that point because what we have seen happen in the last couple of years in Ireland is the numbers of people seeking refuge very significantly increase, and the systems and structures in place having to now be developed around that as well. And we're definitely not unique in this regard. I'm just back from the European Council last week where we had a discussion on the outcome of the European elections. Whether you were a Prime Minister or a President from a big country, a small country, a country in the East or West, whether you were a Socialist Prime Minister or a Conservative one, every single person highlighted migration policy as the biggest policy challenge that they're now dealing with in their country as well. So I say that by way of context. You are right that we have published a comprehensive accommodation strategy for international protection applicants, and that was approved by government at the end of March, on the 27th of March. And the aim here is to try and move from that emergency response and also that reliance on the private market, because that's just simply not good enough, this idea that someone's losing the local hotel or the local bed and breakfast or the local community centre, to move away from that to a more sustainable model. Now, I can tell you a lot of work is underway in relation to progressing that. And the first aspect of that strategy is to identify the use of state land. And as you will know from public commentary, but as I can confirm to you today, there is a site that we're currently working on in Dublin in terms of utilising state land. And I expect that to come on stream in the next number of weeks. That is going to be a very important development, I believe, in terms of being able to say to people who come to our country that we can provide you with, and I have to be honest, it will in the first instance be tented accommodation, but it will be safe tented accommodation with access to sanitation, a marked cry from what we saw on Mount Street only a number of months ago. I take the point about the barriers. I would note that some barriers have been removed in certain locations. I believe some have been removed around the IPO offices as well. I'm certainly told of that. But I do also know there's quite a lot of barriers up. It is a matter for Waterways Ireland to decide when best to remove them, and they are obviously having to balance a number of different challenges as well. But we have already seen some progress made in relation to accommodation. So, for example, I saw a situation in relation to Charlemont Street, I think recently, where there have been tents there. I'm advised by IPAS that every single person who was there has been offered accommodation as well. So in real time, and you're good enough to acknowledge it, there are incredible people both in the voluntary sector and I would argue in IPAS and others who are working to provide accommodation solutions to people. And we have seen several hundred more people provided with accommodation, but none of this is easy. I would just say in conclusion that I don't think any conversation about migration can just be an accommodation. I know you share that view. It also has to be around processing times. That's why yesterday we added 5 more countries to the safe country list, 2 more countries to the visa requirement list. That's why I will chair a cabinet committee next week on migration, where we'll have a chance to get a further update on the comprehensive accommodation strategy as well, and I'm happy to update you further at that stage.
Well, Taoiseach, thank you for the response, and I certainly agree with you on the need to move away from an emergency response and to move away from reliance on the private sector to provide accommodation for those seeking refuge. But we've seen no sign of urgency from government on those 2 issues, which we agree on. You know, for far too long, we in Labour have been pressing you and your government, and indeed your predecessors, Taoiseach, to ensure that there will be a move from an emergency response, that there will be a cross-government coordinated approach, that the Department of Integration will not be left with the entirety of the responsibility of providing shelter, and that we'll see that joined-up thinking applied to the repurposing of state-owned land. So I'm glad to hear it's happening now, but it's very late in the day, and we do need to see, really as a matter of urgency, a move to those Catherine Catherine Day sites, the institution of those Catherine Day sites, those 6 major reception and integration centres. I'm glad you've confirmed that there will be one in Dublin that will be coming on stream in the next few weeks. And I hope that will also see then a removal of the barriers. And I have been in correspondence with Waterways Ireland, and they've assured me that they want to see removal of the barriers too. And they say they will hope to start works sooner than October, but they have, I think, somewhat alarmingly suggested that it's unlikely that they'll be removed before October. And again, that's causing huge concern and disquiet, and it's really not an appropriate response, given particularly when you've had the Catherine Day report for so long, when your own policy was announced in March. It's unacceptable that we're still seeing people camping in tents, forced to stay in public spaces, and then the fencing off of public spaces by way of response from government. It's just not a sustainable response.
I mean, I agree that that's not sustainable, and I think there's no one in this House, and I doubt there's anyone in Waterways Ireland that wouldn't like to see the barriers removed. It just needs to be done in a way that is safe, and I'm conscious that Waterways Ireland are having to monitor that. There's a whole variety of safety issues that do need to be considered. But I would say that we're already seeing some examples around the country of where we are moving from the emergency response. So as a result of policy changes in relation to Ukraine, and as a result of the numbers of people coming from Ukraine significantly reducing, we have, for example, now seen 49 contracts with hotels ended. We've seen contracts with more than 100 bed and breakfasts ended. And if I take County Kerry as an example, we've seen hotels in Killarney and in Dingle that were being used, now not being used, in terms of providing that accommodation. In Galway, 6 contracts ended. In Dublin, 8 contracts ended. These are important changes as we move away from the model of whatever we can take, we must see if we can obtain that. That's not a good value for money model. It's not a good model for social cohesion. We do need to see a public model. I fully agree with that. What I can just tell you is this, and I promise you this: there is absolutely no question in the wide earthly world of any one minister or one department being left on their own in relation to this. I'm personally chairing the Cabinet Committee on Migration. I'm personally invested in this as head of government because it does require a whole of government approach, and that's why we will have a further Cabinet Committee on Migration next week to progress these matters.
Toibin.
Corlia. Taoiseach, Nino Dalmaijan, a 41-year-old Canadian tourist, died yesterday from his injuries sustained by an attack on O'Connell Street last week. God rest him, and deepest sympathies to his families and friends. Last year in this country, murders nearly doubled. Robberies, extortions, hijacking offences increased by 18%. Juvenile crime levels had a massive increase last year as well, with increases in theft, robbery, fraud and sexual offences by teenagers. Domestic abuse cases are at a 50-year high in this country, with 40,000 cases reported last year. I held a public meeting in Meath on the issue of crime recently, and women who work in the retail sector told me that if they catch children shoplifting, that they are often threatened that if they walk home that they will be raped if they go to the Gardaí. These women no longer feel safe walking to and from their place of work, and now get lifts directly to the door of their place of work. Ireland has the highest level of drug deaths in the EU last year. Indeed, the drug fatality rate in Ireland is 4 times the European average at the moment. Ireland is becoming a dangerous place, and there's hardly a street in a town or a city where people are not living in fear. And this is not happening by accident, Taoiseach. I believe that the government are soft on crime, and the government are soft on the causes of crime as well. Last week, the country was rightly up in arms in relation to the shocking treatment of Natasha O'Brien. People are furious with the suspended sentence that was handed down to her attacker. And Taoiseach, you called for a zero-tolerance approach to gender-based violence. The Minister for Justice even stated that she will not tolerate any form of domestic or sexual violence in future. But Taoiseach, this is cynical nonsense. Not only does your government tolerate this level of crime, but your government policies are directly responsible for the increase in lawlessness in this country. Now, just look at the issue of sentencing. The Minister for Justice has admitted to me in a PQ that there has been a doubling in the proportion of appeals due to undue leniency in the court system in the last 8 years. 22% of all appeals in 2016 were for undue leniency. Last year, 42% of all appeals in the court system were for undue leniency. Sentences in this country are becoming more lenient, and that's a staggering change. Now, I have no doubt that the prison system being stuffed has an influence over the sentencing that's happened. The Minister for Justice also admitted to me that the prisons are radically overcrowded. She admitted to me that in just 2 years, the numbers of prisoners forced to a cell has increased fourfold. The number of prisoners treated to a cell has doubled. The prisoners are so full that the Minister for Justice has admitted to me that she is carefully selecting criminals to release early to make space for more criminals to be put in. And that is a parliamentary question that I have for the Minister, black and white. Now, Taoiseach, you state that the sentencing is a responsibility for the judges, but not all the time. Legislation can be created to set minimum custodial sentences for violent and sexual crimes. But this government is allergic to the setting of minimal custodial sentences in law. And you could also strengthen the Garda force, which is on the floor at the moment. When will this government take the issue of crime and antisocial behaviour seriously?
We take it extraordinarily seriously, and your constant misrepresentation of the position of the Minister for Justice, time and time again, and indeed, I believe some of your commentary in terms of some of the changes that she's tried to make, and the introduction of wokery into public debate has certainly not helped, quite frankly, because if we're deadly serious about creating a zero-tolerance approach to domestic, sexual and gender-based violence, it would be important that people in here have the courage to bring about some of the legislative changes that are required in that space as well. I want to again reiterate my absolute sympathy to the family of Nino on the most horrific tragedy that has been encountered, and confirm to this House that obviously there's an active Garda murder inquiry underway, and indeed there's been a number of individuals already arrested as well. I agree with you on one point though, Deputy, and I think it's an important point. I am concerned about the increased prevalence of violence that we're seeing in Irish society. And I know shortly after the leaders' questions today, we're going to have statements on domestic, sexual and gender-based violence. And I think there's a number of very serious issues that we need to address, in fairness, some of which I've heard you speak passionately about before, in terms of issues around pornography, lack of sex education, how young men are experiencing these issues rather than being informed in a scientific, evidence-based way as well. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done in that space. But I want people watching at home to know that contrary to your characterisation of this government's position on law and order, this is a government that has constantly supported Garda recruitment. It is a government that has seen 157 more Gardaí attest from Templemore as recently as last week. It's a government that, despite COVID closing the Garda College not once but twice, has put a real focus on this. This month we'll bring forward more proposals based on what we've heard from frontline Gardaí in terms of more measures we can do to help around recruitment and retention. When it comes to prison capacity, we don't have enough prison capacity, and that's not, by the way, meaning that we need to see an increase in incarceration rates. Just simply from a population point of view, we don't have enough prison capacity, and that's why the Minister has received approval to expand further prison capacity. Is a very important piece of work in relation to that. It's why we have put body cams on our Gardaí. I was there at the start of that process with Minister McEntee, where they've now been rolled out in Dublin. It's why we are changing laws around knife crime. It's why we've changed sentencing around assault causing harm. So we are taking absolute action, and there's nothing cynical at all about the Minister's commitment to domestic, sexual, gender-based violence. And I think even her most ardent opponents would acknowledge that this is an area she has placed an incredible focus and shown huge political leadership, often in the face of unfair criticism of her on occasion too, that should be called out for what it is.
Taoiseach, I think there's a disconnect between your rhetoric and the reality on the ground. And I think for people listening into this debate, it's like you're talking about an alternative universe in many ways. I heard you talk about another task force. There's nearly a Father Ted element to that. Is there, anything to be said about another task force, maybe in relation to this? There's something to be said about actually employing more Gardaí, and this is the major problem, Taoiseach. And unless it's actually fixed, we're going to see this problem increase. Garda numbers are at their lowest per capita in the last 5 years. We have one of the lowest police force per capita in the whole of the European Union. Gardaí are retiring and resigning more than they're being recruited at the moment. And actually, for some months, resignations make up the majority of Gardaí that are actually leaving the force. And you mentioned the horrific deaths on the roads. I brought up the fact that 5 years ago, there was well over 1,000 Gardaí policing the roads. Now there's less than 600. If you don't have the Gardaí to enforce the laws, behaviours are going to change, and there's going to be more accidents, and more people are going to lose their lives. The collapse in the number of Gardaí has had a massive effect in making our streets and our town squares less safe over the last while. And absolutely, there's no doubt in my mind that unless we deal with the sentencing and the prison spaces, more people are going to get off scot-free with lenient sentences in relation to violent, sexual and assaults in future, and that has to change.
Well, let me start and see where I can agree with you. We need more Gardaí. That's true. It's a statement of fact, and that's why we're putting a huge focus on Garda recruitment and retention. You'll see more measures from us this month in relation to that too. And in relation to Garda roads policing, I've met the Garda Commissioner on this, I've met the Assistant Garda Commissioner with responsibility for roads policing, and of course met the Minister for Justice. I've personally chaired 2 meetings of the Ministerial Road Safety Committee. This year you will see an increase in roads policing Gardaí as well. There's also been a direction from the Commissioner in relation to a focus on roads policing. But we also know that killer behaviours need to change on the roads, and you shouldn't need a guard to tell you not to drink and drive. You shouldn't need a guard to tell you not to take drugs and drive. You shouldn't need a guard not to tell you to speed as well. Yeah, but let's not just say everything is down to the guards. When you, and I don't mean you, when one gets behind the wheel of a car, we have individual important responsibilities too. Second issue I do agree with you on is the issue of sentencing. Now, what we have done, and maybe we don't agree on how we get there, but what we have done is we have set up, obviously, the Judicial Council through the Judicial Council Act 2019, and there is currently a body of work underway in relation to sentencing guidelines. The first area that they're looking at in relation to sentencing guidelines is in the area of domestic violence, and they're due to have those sentencing guidelines in place before the end of this year. The second area they're looking at in terms of sentencing guidelines is the issue of fatal driving offences.
Thank you very much. Now we go to Deputy Michael Collins, please.
Thank you, Taoiseach, the horticulture industry was worth an estimated 566 million in 2023. The areas of the industry are broad and diverse, from mushrooms and potatoes, field crops, protected fruit and vegetable, outdoor soft and top fruit, hardy nursery stock, protected crops, Christmas trees, cut foliage, outdoor flowers and bulbs and turfgrass. Yet Ireland imports approximately 85% of our fruits and vegetables, and possibly over 60% of our other plants needlessly, at some risk to our country, considering the potential impact of importing deadly pests and diseases, recent example being ash dieback and sudden oak death, which are causing havoc on our rural and urban landscapes, forestry, wood and our woodland industries. For such a vital industry with so much prospect, then why is it that the industry is not growing? Considering that we import so much, why has the government and previously the Fáill Fine Gael governments done little or nothing at all to protect the industry? Taoiseach, possibly the most important element to the industry is its people. Operative managers and their entrepreneurs are of horticulture, like most industries. Attracting people to industries of vital national importance is surely part of a government's remit, is it not? Yet our education system fills courses with students who may never find work in the areas they are studying for, and industries like horticulture are stagnating without new Irish people to lead it, with the numbers of students in horticulture nationally in a steady decline. Taoiseach, would you agree that an industry is only as good as the people who lead it? Would you agree that the better equipped those people are with, say, education, the better the chance they will have to grow the industry, offer jobs, tax revenue, solutions to vital food and biodiversity security, reduce carbon miles and to innovate? Taoiseach, can you outline what the government's plans are for the horticulture industry and horticulture education nationally? Because, Taoiseach, not so long ago I brought to you attention in this House the case of a vital Level 5 ETB horticultural course in Skibbereen that Cork ETB now says they are going to discontinue. Yet they have more applicants than normal for this time of year and get most applicants in August and September. But the ETB claim not to have viable numbers from sending people, after sending people away from doing the course, even though people want to do it. One wonders why, I ask. Is it rationalisation, or perhaps making life easy for administrators, or what is it that would be more important than sustainability and viability of our country? Can you explain how, at such a vital time, when vital sustainable industries that can help reduce climate change impacts are so needed, why are we shutting down vital horticultural courses the industry is crying out for? People, Taoiseach, is there anyone at the helm of the ship on education and direction for the industries of this this country. Even other government departments are investigating education in horticulture at present, as it is affecting the potential of the industry. Can it be explained to the career guidance at secondary schools how important the industry is? Can horticulture be prioritised as a vital sector to fast-track industry development and replace carbon costly imports? Taoiseach, can you see to it that proper support be invested in promoting and supporting horticulture education in Ireland, and that the Level 5 course in horticulture in Skibbereen be reinstated with immediate effect?
Thank you, Deputy Collins. Taoiseach.
I want to thank Deputy Collins for raising this important matter, and I do note that he did raise the issue in relation to the horticulture course in Skibbereen with me previously in this House, and I've done a little bit of research which I'll engage with him on now in a moment. But yes, I mean, the first thing is there is huge importance in investing in talent and investing in our people, and I believe in making sure we have an education system that has multiple pathways for people to reach their full potential. And for some people that will be university, for some people that will be our education and training boards, for some people it'll be a combination of both, for some people it'll be in work training, and for some people it'll be the apprenticeship or traineeship model. And I do think there's been a rigidity to our education system in years gone by that we need to challenge. And I think that's something that there is a political consensus on, and I was honoured to be the first Minister for Further and Higher Education. I know there's a lot of work going on in that space and a very can-do sector as well. So I agree with you on that. I also agree with you on the importance of horticulture. And I think your diagnosis of the challenge is right. We need to be able to do a hell of a lot more in this country, and we need to be, because that makes sense from a whole variety of areas economically, but also from a green, from a climate agenda, from a sustainability agenda as well. Now we are, and the figures, any set of figures will show you this, Deputy Collins, we're absolutely expanding the number of educational courses across the country. We're expanding the amount of money to the ETBs, their budgets, the amount of people going. So all of these things are beyond dispute, beyond question, and I can produce you any amount of data to show you that the third level sector is growing in every dimension. But you are right, there does seem to be a particular issue in relation to this horticulture course, and I'm happy to further engage on this because I did make inquiries, and my note tells me different to you, as you may not be surprised, but I want to share with you what I'm told. So I am told that the Department of Further and Higher Education made inquiries with Cork ETB, and what I was told was that the ETB has decided to remove its offering of the course for the academic year 24-25, as it's not considered to be viable based on the low level of applications to date. The Horticulture Post Leaving Cert Level 5 course offered in Skibbereen under the auspices of the Morrison Island campus of the Cork College of Further Education and Training has, I'm told, seen enrolments and course completions fall consistently over the last number of years. And what the ETB would tell me is that they need to have a level of demand for any course in determining its schedule of courses and making the most effective use of its college. So they're saying that they don't currently believe there's a level sufficient to support a class group, and therefore it's not possible for any provider, including the ETB, to meet that demand. Now you're giving me different data, which I'm not disputing, and I'd be very happy to see that, and I'd be very happy for my office to engage directly with Cork ETB, and let's at least have there can only be one set of figures, there can't be two versions of the truth here. Now what I would say more broadly in relation to the horticulture sector, there is now a horticultural apprenticeship programme that's been recently developed for the first time in this area. It's been developed with Teagasc, and I do think this is an important part of what you're rightly saying about how do we encourage more people to come into horticulture. Well, I think it's by providing apprenticeship routes and pathways, and I think the point you make about promoting it as a career is something that I'm certainly happy to talk with our agencies about and revert to in writing.
Taoiseach, Deputy Collins.
Thank you very much, Taoiseach, for your reply. And you say we may have different data, and that's maybe something we can engage on. I look forward to engaging with you on this issue. But Taoiseach, remember one thing: the course deadline for applicants is September. A decision seems to have been made in March, April, May, or June. I don't know, by the ETB, with little or no consultation with the people on the ground. So how can they make a decision on how many people are going? Because I have people contacting me saying they're interested and they're sorry when they see it up on my social media that it's closing. They're sorry that it is, and they've contacted local media. So there's an issue here. The ETB made a decision at a very early stage to pull this, and they're not giving that opportunity. Remember, it's Skibbereen. We can't talk about Morris Island. When you're talking to people in Castledunbear, you're talking to people in the Beara or the Sheep's Head Peninsula, you're talking to people in Skibbereen, Bantry, and that surrounds. Ask them to go up to Cork City every day to do a course. Young people that can't afford to do that. It's a crazy situation. They're closing it quite simply because of its geographical position. That's why they're closing it. Everyone will tell you that on the ground in West Cork, and they've been allowed to make that decision. I got on to Minister Bacik, who has come back to me, but he's given me the ETB spin. I don't want the ETB spin. I want the human spin. There's a horticultural course that was available to people in Skibbereen going to be closed down? Will you intervene and make sure that doesn't happen?
Thank you. Taoiseach.
Well, look, I'll certainly undertake to look into it because I know a little bit about it from my time in that department, and I would have been down at the Cork College of Further Education and Training, and I would have been made aware of the horticulture. Of course, I'm trying to remember if I visited the actual facility in Skibbereen. I'm not sure, but I could have, because I certainly was involved in a number of discussions around horticulture in Cork, and I know there was a general level of excitement that there were education and training programmes there, and there was a benefit seen to the local regional economy as well. So look, what I will do in the first instance is I'll relay your concerns to Minister O'Donovan, and I'll ask that he re-engages with Cork ETB in relation to this. I'll put it to them that your view is that the decision is premature, that there is more interest coming than perhaps they know. Let's ascertain that and see if that does bear out. And maybe the second thing I could do is ask the Regional Skills Fora for the Southwest region to also have a look at course provision. I am conscious when we talk about Cork here, and Dunn, it's a very big county, and I am conscious of the idea of asking somebody to move from West Cork into Cork City is just not viable. So let me take a further look at it and come back to you.
Thank you very much, Taoiseach. That concludes leaders' questions. And we move quickly on to questions on policy or legislation. Deputy Mary Lou McDonald.